Most people will reject this truth, but if you don't, you'll be free. Stay with me, because the truth waiting at the end will change how you protect your peace forever. I've seen men collapse from many things, from failure, from betrayal, from heartbreak. But there's something that destroys men faster than pornography. It's subtle, it's silent, and most men never see it coming until it's already eroded their drive, their clarity, and their identity. The dangerous part is, it doesn't look destructive. It often disguises itself as connection, loyalty, even love. And this is where Carl Jung's work cuts deeper than almost anyone is comfortable admitting. Jung understood that the most dangerous forces in our psyche aren't the obvious temptations we can name and resist. It's the forces that enter disguised as nourishment but end up draining us from the inside. I've lived this truth. I've seen men, strong men, who avoided every obvious vice. They didn't waste their lives on addictions. They didn't get pulled into toxic habits, but they still ended up hollow, resentful, and exhausted. Why? Because they gave their mental and emotional energy away to something they thought was safe. And that something was emotional dependency. Dependency on how someone else reacts to them. Dependency on how someone else feels about them. Dependency on approval, validation, and being needed. Pornography is destructive because it hijacks a man's natural drives and numbs his instincts. But emotional dependency destroys him because it rewires his sense of self around someone else's emotional climate. I've been there myself. I've watched my confidence shrink, my focus blur, my purpose weaken, not because of what I was doing, but because of what I was absorbing every day. Living on someone else's approval is like living on junk food. It tastes good in the moment, but over time, it weakens you. This is the part men don't want to admit. They think being needed gives them strength. They think constant access to someone's affection means stability. But I've learned, the moment your stability depends on someone else's emotions, you've already lost the battle. Jung called this process identification, when your sense of self becomes fused with something outside of you. And once you've identified with someone else's moods, behaviors, or approval, you stop being the man who leads. You become the man who reacts. And nothing destroys masculine energy faster than living in reaction. This is why I say emotional dependency destroys men faster than pornography ever could. Because at least with pornography, a man knows he's stepping into an artificial world. But with emotional dependency, he believes he's living in reality, while his power is being drained quietly every day. Here's the first mistake I see men make, and I made it myself for years. They think emotional dependency only happens in weak men. They think it's a problem for guys with no confidence, no ambition, no backbone. But here's what I've learned the hard way. It's often the strongest, most capable men who fall into it the deepest. Why? Because capable men are often givers by nature. They know how to build, how to provide, how to protect. And when they enter a relationship, whether romantic, friendship, or even work, they naturally pour energy into it. That's not a weakness. It's part of being a man of value. But it becomes dangerous when that investment becomes an identity. I've been there. At first, it felt good to be needed. Her reliance on me felt like proof of my value. Every time she reached out, every time she leaned on me emotionally, it gave me a sense of purpose. But what I didn't realize at the time was this. The more I allowed my purpose to revolve around being her emotional anchor, the less I was anchored in myself. And here's where evolutionary psychology comes in. Men are wired to protect and provide. Women are wired to test and respond. This natural polarity works when a man's protection comes from strength, not from a need to keep the other person calm at all costs. But when a man's stability is tied to her mood, he's no longer leading from strength. He's leading from fear. Fear of her withdrawing affection. Fear of her emotional storms. Fear of losing her approval. That fear changes everything. It makes him less decisive. It makes him second-guess his instincts. It makes him prioritize harmony over truth. I've watched this destroy men. They don't even notice the shift happening at first. They think they're just being good partners, but slowly they're training themselves to live in reaction to someone else's emotions. And here's the truth Jung understood. Anything you over-identify with will eventually own you. Pornography can dull a man's instincts, but emotional dependency rewires his instincts entirely. It doesn't just numb his drive, it redirects it. His focus goes from building his life to maintaining someone else's emotional stability. That's why this destroys men so quickly, because the man doesn't even see it as a problem until years later, when he realizes he's lost the fire he once had. And by then, rebuilding himself feels almost impossible, unless he breaks the dependency completely. This is why most men never recover their energy, their clarity, or their masculine center, because they never see the real addiction for what it is. Here's the second mistake I see over and over. Men assume that if their intentions are good, everything will work out. They believe that their willingness to give, to show up, to support, will be recognized and respected. I thought the same, but here's the brutal truth. Not every woman will value your effort, and the wrong woman will weaponize your willingness to give until there's nothing left of you. This is where the toxic woman warning comes in. A grounded woman will appreciate a man who shows up consistently, but a toxic woman will use that consistency as a leash. I've seen it in my own life. I've watched how a woman can slowly condition a man to put her emotions at the center of his life. At first, it looks like she just needs reassurance. But over time, it becomes expectation, and then it becomes demand. And here's the shift most men miss. The moment she knows you will rearrange your life to stabilize her feelings, you've traded respect for control. This isn't always conscious on her part. But in toxic dynamics, her subconscious takes the wheel. She will test you harder. She will push more. She will see how far she can stretch your boundaries. I've been in that position, and I've watched countless men break under the pressure, not because they're weak, but because they're trying to avoid conflict. But here's what Jung understood about shadow dynamics. Avoiding conflict is often just avoiding the truth. A toxic woman will sense when you are afraid to lose her approval, and that's when she knows she can move the boundary line, over and over, until there's no boundary left. This is how emotional dependency becomes destruction, because now you're not just trying to maintain her affection, you're actively betraying your own needs to keep the peace. And here's the truth that most men refuse to face. Every time you betray yourself for her comfort, you lose a little more of her respect. I've seen this exact cycle destroy strong men. Men who started out with vision, discipline, and confidence slowly reshaped into reactive, hesitant versions of themselves, all because they didn't see that the real danger wasn't the arguments, the drama, or the tension. It was the quiet surrender of their own authority. And when that's gone, it's almost impossible to rebuild without completely breaking free of the dependency. This is why I say, if a woman cannot respect your boundaries, she cannot respect you. And a man without self-respect cannot lead himself, let alone anyone else. A lot of men think the solution to emotional dependency is cutting themselves off completely. They swing to the opposite extreme. I've done it myself. After years of bending to keep the peace, I decided I'd never be moved by anyone's emotions again. I became cold, detached, and I thought that was strength. But here's what I learned. The masculine doesn't become strong by shutting down. It becomes strong by staying open, but unmoved. This is the heart of masculine versus feminine conflict. The feminine tests, the masculine holds, and holding doesn't mean ignoring her feelings. It means you don't let her emotions throw you off center. When I finally understood this, everything changed. Instead of avoiding emotional moments, I could meet them calmly. Instead of trying to fix her emotions, I could stay steady while she moved through them. This is where emotional tone mastery becomes critical. A man with emotional tone mastery knows how to, but stay calm under emotional pressure and speak with clarity instead of defensiveness. offer warmth without surrendering his frame, and maintain boundaries without hostility. I had to train myself in this. It wasn't natural at first, but the more I practiced, the more I saw respect grow, not just in relationships, but in every area of life. Here are 5 tools I've used to keep my center strong. 1. The pause. When tension rises, I don't react instantly. I breathe. I wait. I respond from stillness, not from emotion. 2. The redirect. Instead of feeding chaos, I guide the energy toward clarity. I hear you. Let's look at what actually matters here. 3. The boundary frame. I make my limits clear without drama. This doesn't work for me. If it continues, things will change. 4. The scarcity reminder. Not through threats, but through living a life so full and purposeful that my time is naturally valuable. 5. The consistency signal. I live my standards. I don't announce them, I embody them. Over time, this consistency speaks louder than words. These tools aren't games, they're discipline. And when you live this way, emotional dependency breaks. Not because you distance yourself from people, but because you no longer let anyone else's emotions decide who you are. Acting like you're nothing is not the same as becoming nothing. I have seen men confuse these ideas. They think detachment means emptiness. But what Jung understood, and what I learned by living it, is that true detachment is not about absence. It's about rootedness. The men who fall fastest are the ones who lose their roots. They make someone else's approval the soil they stand in. And when that approval is withdrawn, they collapse. Pornography can dull a man's instincts, but emotional dependency rots them from the inside, because it doesn't just weaken his drive, it replaces his center. Jung wrote about individuation, the process of becoming whole within yourself. That process cannot happen if your center of gravity is someone else's emotions. I've been on both sides of this. I've lived as a man whose peace rose and fell with someone else's moods. And I've lived as a man whose peace stayed steady no matter what storms came. And here's the truth I carry now. A man who cannot hold himself will always be controlled by what he fears to lose. A man who can hold himself will never be controlled at all. This is why I say, emotional dependency destroys men faster than pornography, because it doesn't just distract you, it redefines you. And once you've lost that definition, everything else falls with it. The only way out is to reclaim your center, to stand in yourself so completely that no approval can create you and no rejection can destroy you. That is the work Jung pointed toward. And that is the only path that leads to a man who cannot be undone. If this shifted something in you, like the video to anchor it, subscribe if you're done fighting the wrong way and ready to lead with calm strength. And if you know a man who needs to hear this, send it to him. This is Depthoria, for men who choose emotional intelligence over chaos. We'll see you in the next depth.